Imagine a man rising from obscurity, someone who stood before a nation and said, "We did not achieve our goals, for now." Who was this soldier whose words sparked not disappointment, but unshakable hope? What could a single phrase, "for now," possibly mean to millions? Before we dive deeper, if you're fascinated by stories that reshape history, hit like, subscribe to my history profiles, and turn on notifications so you never miss the truth behind the headlines. Because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about power, revolution, and a nation teetering on the edge of ruin. But who was Hugo Chávez, and how did one failed military uprising lead to a presidency that redefined the divide between the United States and Venezuela? The answer starts here, and it might surprise you. A soldier in the shadows, 1954–1992. He was born in a dusty town called Sabaneta in Barinas State, Venezuela, in 1954. Not in a palace or a mansion, but in a working-class home. The second of 6 children, Hugo Rafael Chávez Frias grew up with ordinary struggles but extraordinary dreams. What does a boy with humble beginnings desire most? To rise above his circumstances? To be heard? To matter? When Chávez finished school, he didn't choose wealth, he didn't choose politics. Instead, he joined the military, a decision that would shape not just his life, but the fate of his entire country. By 1975, he graduated from the Venezuelan Military Academy, impressive but not unique. Yet within him burned a question that few others in uniform dared to whisper. Could Venezuela be better? Could a nation wealthy in oil, yet poor in opportunity, find a path to dignity? In time, Chávez became more than a soldier. He became a voice for those whose voices had been ignored. And as unrest simmered across Venezuela in the 1980s, Chávez's instincts were sharpened by a truth he couldn't ignore. The people were suffering. The roar before the storm. Venezuela was in crisis, not the kind temporary disruptions you read about in economics books, but deep, searing pain that scorched the spirit of millions. Neoliberal policies backed by international financial institutions, the kind of policies that promised stability but delivered austerity, had worsened unemployment, inflation, and despair. And then came February 1989. Imagine entire cities erupting in fury. Men and women, young and old, pouring into the streets of Caracas and beyond. What began as protest became chaos. The government's response was brutal. Over 300 people died. Streets that once teemed with life were stained with blood. This event, later called El Caracazo, was not just a riot, it was the sound of a nation cracking open at the seams. And in those cracked seams, something unexpected was born, a rising belief that the old order was finished. 3 years later, that belief became action. The attempt that failed, but changed everything. 1992. It was February 1992. Chávez was a lieutenant colonel, commanding a battalion of paratroopers, but the title mattered little next to the question burning in his heart: how long must our people suffer? With over 1,000 fellow soldiers, he attempted to overthrow President Carlos Andrés Pérez's government. They believed the time had come for dramatic change, but they failed. They did not seize the capital. They did not take power. They did not topple the government. And yet, the world was about to see the beginning of something far greater than a coup. What happened next was not surrender. It was something no one expected. From a broadcast camera, Chávez delivered a message that would echo for decades. Comrades, unfortunately, for now we did not reach the goals we set in the capital city. For now. Just 2 words, but in them was a promise. A confession. A challenge. He didn't say never. Instead, he claimed responsibility. Not with excuses, but honesty. And for millions watching, that honesty was electrifying. Why? Because in a country where leaders pointed fingers, avoided blame, or denied responsibility, here was a man saying, "I will take it all." He said, "You did well out there," to the rebels in other regions, and then, "We must avoid more bloodshed." Calm, responsible, brave. And with that measured voice, he did more than lead a failed revolt. He became a leader. From prison to politics, 1994 to 1998. After the failed uprising, Chávez was imprisoned. But within the walls of San Francisco de Miranda prison, his voice didn't die, it spread. In 1994, President Rafael Caldera pardoned Chávez. And suddenly, the man who once marched against the government was stepping into the political arena. Now, many might ask, can a man go from rebel to president? Venezuelans were about to find out. The political duopoly of the Democratic Action and Social Christian parties had ruled for decades, as if power was their personal inheritance. But the people were tired. They were poor, staggering under a poverty rate that approached 80%, a shocking reality in a land rich with oil. Extreme poverty gripped nearly 30% of the population. People went hungry, children grew up without basic needs, and disillusionment spread like wildfire. For those who suffered, Chávez didn't speak policy, he spoke identity. He spoke dignity. He spoke to the marginalized, not at them. And in 1998, Venezuela made a choice no one saw coming. By a decisive vote, Chávez was elected president. But what did that really mean? What did a former coup leader, once imprisoned and shunned by elites, plan to do with power now fully in his hands? Revolution begins, 1999 to 2000. At his inauguration, Chávez promised transformation, not incremental change, but deep, structural reform. Barely months into his presidency, he called for a constituent assembly, a group tasked with rewriting Venezuela's constitution. Not just a new law book, but a new identity for a country on the brink of transformation. The new constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela was more than words. It was a statement: the people are sovereign. But as you might be wondering, did this shift heal Venezuela? Or deepen the divide? Chávez launched social reforms, literacy campaigns, community councils, and programs that gave a voice, and food, education, and healthcare, to millions who had never benefited from state resources. For the poor, it was nothing less than salvation. For the wealthy and foreign investors, it felt like upheaval. And that's when the world began paying attention. The charismatic commander, 2000s, Chávez wasn't like other presidents. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like he was in your living room, direct, affectionate, guileless. He hugged strangers, asked about your children, laughed with old women on street corners, shared biscuits from a child's hand. Moments that went viral long before viral was a word people used. His charisma was infectious and polarizing. Some saw a hero. Others saw a threat. One thing was certain: he connected. And when you see a leader connect that deeply with the common people, you have to ask, are they inspiring unity or division? Because for every person cheering in Caracas, there was another questioning his methods, his ideology, his alliances. A new socialist vision, mid-2000s. As his power consolidated, Chávez declared a bold goal: socialism of the 21st century. Not Marxism-Leninism, not Soviet doctrine. Something Venezuelan, something modern, something rooted in community and dignity. But with every step into socialism, critics, both inside and outside Venezuela, raised alarms. Isn't socialism dangerous? Doesn't it stifle economic growth? Doesn't it antagonize global powers? And yet, Chávez pressed on, convinced that a new model was essential. He nationalized industries, redirected oil revenue to fund education and health, and forged alliances not with Washington, but with leaders around the world, from Cuba's Fidel Castro to later bonds with Russia and China. And here's the twist: in doing so, he didn't just reshape Venezuela's economy, he reshaped its foreign relations. Suddenly, a small South American oil nation was refusing to bow to the United States. And that was unprecedented. But what consequences would that decision have? The opposition strikes back, 2002-2004. Not everyone supported Chávez. In fact, the opposition grew restless, emboldened, and increasingly desperate. In April 2002, a coup briefly ousted Chávez, but within days, the people rallied, and he returned to power. That moment was more than political chaos. It was a clear message: Venezuela is divided, but Chávez still has influence. Then in 2004, opponents gathered signatures to demand a recall referendum, a test of national confidence in Chávez's leadership. The result? Chávez won, not narrowly, convincingly. It was a dramatic moment. A nation asked, "Do you want this president?" And the answer echoed loudly, "Yes." Why did so many choose him, even amid controversy? Because for many, Chávez wasn't a politician. He was one of them. A symbol of resistance against inequality, exclusion, and foreign domination. But the critics, especially in the United States and among Western media, saw something very different. They saw a leader flirting with authoritarianism. They saw socialism as a threat. They saw a shift in power they could not control. And that perception would set the stage for decades of tension between two nations once friendly, now distant, regional influence and global realignment. Chávez didn't just want to transform Venezuela. He wanted to unite Latin America. He championed alliances like ALBA, UNASUR, and CELAC, organizations aimed at integrating the region politically and economically without U.S. dominance. Leaders in Bolivia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and beyond saw Chávez not as a provocateur, but as a partner. Together, they challenged a global order long shaped by Washington, and Chávez didn't stop there. He lent money to countries in crisis, reopened key industries in places like Argentina, and stood publicly with leaders from Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East who opposed Western hegemony. To some, he was a unifier. To others, a destabilizing force. Yet through it all, one question kept arising. Was Chávez building a new world or igniting a new conflict? Personal struggles and public resilience, cancer and leadership. Behind the public persona was a man battling his own mortality. In 2011, Chávez revealed he had cancer. The world watched as he faced surgeries, treatments, and months away from public life. Rumors swirled. Critics predicted collapse. Supporters prayed for recovery. Even in illness, he spoke with defiant optimism. "I do not want to die. I want to live, truly live." But in March 2013, the unthinkable happened. Hugo Chávez, the indomitable commander, passed away. When the news broke, Venezuela was stunned. Millions mourned like a personal loss. Streets that once echoed political slogans now echoed grief. Here was a man whose life was deeply entwined with his nation's soul, and now he was gone. For some, it was heartbreak beyond words. For others, a moment of reflection. What comes next for Venezuela? For Latin America? For the world? Legacy and controversy. Chávez's funeral drew leaders from around the globe, a testament to his international impact. But his legacy is a mosaic of passion and debate. To supporters, he was a liberator, a champion of the poor, a unifier of nations, a voice for the voiceless. To critics, he was a polarizing figure, whose policies strained the economy, antagonized powerful nations, and deepened internal divides. So what is the truth? That depends on who you ask. Is a leader judged by their intentions or their outcomes? By the love they inspire or the opposition they provoke? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in the tension between both. Why Chávez still matters. Hugo Chávez did not fit into a comfortable category. He was not merely a politician, not merely a revolutionary, not merely a president. He was a force, unpredictable, intense, charismatic, and transformative. He reshaped his country and challenged global dynamics. He inspired millions while electrifying controversy. He gave voice to Venezuela's poor while provoking global scrutiny. He stood defiantly against powerful nations while igniting passionate debate about governance, equity, and sovereignty. So ask yourself, what happens when a leader becomes larger than the office they hold? When history and myth begin to blur? When a nation's dreams hinge on one man's vision? That is the legacy of Hugo Chávez. And whether you see him as hero or cautionary tale, his story will continue to shape conversations far beyond Venezuela's borders. If you appreciate deep dives like this, subscribe to My History Profiles for more powerful historical narratives that challenge what you think you know. Thanks for watching, and keep questioning history.